NATO Summit. President Joe Biden and Western allies address the war in Ukraine. We have the latest. Supreme Court nominee. As the hearings for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson wind down, we have analysis on 4 busy days and what comes next. Fighting for life. How one U.S. state is following Texas in its efforts to protect the unborn. And feeding the soul. A company's effort to bring food to Ukrainian refugees also includes a spiritual dimension. We'll explain. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, March 24th, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. Final preparations are underway for the consecration tomorrow by Pope Francis of Russia and Ukraine to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. The service in Rome coincides with the Feast of the Annunciation. The Holy Father has asked the faithful around the world to join him. Meantime, the fighting in Ukraine continues. Russian officials say they have taken control of a city around 90 miles from Ukraine's capital. The Kremlin also says it is providing relief to citizens of the war-torn city of Mariupol. Just a reminder, you can watch the Holy Father's consecration of Russia and Ukraine to the Immaculate Heart of Mary right here on EWTN. We have 2 hours of coverage beginning at noon Eastern in the United States. And on tomorrow night's newscast, we will have a report from Rome. While the Biden administration and its allies just ramped up their already crippling sanctions on Russia. In addition to energy, banks, and oligarchs, the new sanctions now target hundreds of more individuals and entities, as well as Russia's gold reserves. White House correspondent Owen Jensen has the details. Owen.
Tracy, at a NATO summit today, President Joe Biden said the new sanctions target more than 300 members of the Duma, or Russian parliament, 328 to be precise, as well as board members of a financial institution and several Russian defense contractors. President Joe Biden arrives at today's NATO summit in Brussels, Belgium, first meeting with the NATO Secretary General, before joining other world leaders at the emergency session concerning Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
The single most important thing is for us to stay unified, and the world continue to focus on what a brute this guy is, and all the innocent people's lives are being lost and ruined.
The NATO leaders later posing for a picture together, standing in defense of Europe.
We are determined to continue to impose costs on Russia to bring about the end of this brutal war.
The president of Ukraine addressed the group via video, requesting more weapons.
Ukraine never wanted this war. We don't want to fight. We simply want to survive, to save our people.
And the Ukrainian Navy released this video saying it sunk a Russian ship in a port city that's been under Russian control since February 27th. The war also a pressing issue for G7 leaders who joined President Biden for a discussion today.
The reality is that Vladimir Putin has already crossed the red line into barbarism.
President Biden also met privately with European Council President Charles Michel and attended a European Council summit to discuss the humanitarian crisis caused by the war.
To be engaged and do all we can to ease the suffering and pain of innocent women and children and men, for that matter, throughout Ukraine.
The Biden administration just revealed its plans to welcome up to 100,000 refugees from Ukraine, which is just a fraction of the 3 million people who have already fled the war-torn country. President Biden also said today that President Putin has always wanted to break up NATO, that he'd rather face 30 independent countries as opposed to 30 united countries. And asked if Russia uses chemical weapons, the president said, quote, "We would respond," adding that the nature of the response would depend on the nature of the use. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
A death row inmate in Texas will be allowed to have his pastor pray out loud and touch him during a lethal injection execution. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled 8-1 today in favor of John Henry Ramirez. The Supreme Court had stayed his capital punishment last September during the appeal. Today marks the fourth and final day of Supreme Court confirmation hearings for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. Today's session featured panels with assessments of the nominee. The American Bar Association says its recommendation is professional, not political.
In that regard, we focus on the record of the nominee, we focus on the writings of the nominee, and we focus on the feedback we get from the lawyers and judges that practice with the nominee, against the nominee, and administer justice alongside the nominee.
Do you have an
Addressing the issue of abortion during Tuesday's hearing, Senator John Kennedy asked Judge Brown Jackson directly, quote, "When does life begin, in your opinion?"
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I don't know.
Ma'am?
I don't know.
Do you have a belief?
I have personal, religious, and otherwise beliefs that have nothing to do with the law in terms of when life begins.
Do you have a personal belief, though?
As a follow-up question, the senator asked if the judge had a personal belief when life begins. Judge Brown Jackson responded, quote, "I have a religious view that I set aside when I am ruling on cases." And joining me now to discuss is Carrie Severino, president of the Judicial Crisis Network. Carrie, welcome back. Always so good to see you. First off, what were your impressions of the hearings?
Well, unfortunately, we saw a lot of answers like the one you just played to Justice Kennedy, where Judge Jackson, while she may have had answers in her head, she refused to share them with the committee, and not only on issues that are not strictly speaking legal, like when life begins, or as often others have pointed out, Senator Marshall Blackburn's question is how you define a woman. She was also unwilling to answer that, or unwilling or unable. She said she's not a biologist, but also on legal questions that you would think this clearly is something you can talk about. What is your judicial philosophy? She claimed not to have a judicial philosophy. And then periodically she would claim to have one, but then she didn't want to define it in any clear way. She didn't even want to characterize her potential future colleagues' own judicial philosophy, including the judge that she worked for. So it was very frustrating because the senators have to take a vote on this incredibly important nomination. And we have a nominee who, I think, because she recognizes the stakes in this nomination, and recognizes that the typical liberal perspective of a judge and the people that are backing her is not the one the American people want to see, which is that we want someone who's going to be confining themselves to reading law as it's written and the Constitution as it was originally understood. So while she talked about those kind of principles, she also was unwilling to commit to any one philosophy herself, and said she's not an originalist.
Yeah, and I'm curious, I mean, how do you think her confirmation hearings compare to the last Supreme Court nominee, now Associate Justice Amy Coney Barrett? Can you compare the two?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, we always can be frustrated that, you want to hear the specifics from a nominee. How would you vote, say, in the Dobbs case that's coming up to overturn Roe versus Wade? How would you vote on this issue or that? We know they're not going to share those. But Amy Coney Barrett was much more forthcoming in discussing some of the details, and certainly has a very well articulated philosophy of judging. She was, as a scholar, she wrote extensively on that and could talk about it in great detail. Jackson, on the other hand, refused to give any details, and that's very concerning because you can't expect people to vote for a nominee who won't share how he or she really approaches the law, except to say that she wants to do so fairly and even-handedly. Well, I should hope that's any judge's approach, but we know there are significant differences methodologically in how judges approach the law, and she was unwilling to take a position on any of those.
Yeah, and something else that stood out to me was the fact that she stated her intention to recuse herself from a case regarding Harvard's race-conscious admissions policy, a case that could ultimately end affirmative action in college admissions. I want to get your thoughts on that, what you thought.
Yeah, I was very glad to hear her say that. She serves on the Harvard Board of Overseers and has, during the pendency of this litigation, that Harvard has been sued and is now years into this litigation over its practice that is borne out by the statistics of discriminating against Asian American students in its admissions. And so that has been challenged because Harvard receives federal funding and shouldn't be allowed to discriminate on the basis of race. And since she was part of the Board of Overseers, it's entirely appropriate for her to recuse herself because she was on the inside of this organization that is a party to this lawsuit and is being sued and now coming before the Supreme Court. So I thought that was the correct answer. I think it will be a very significant case coming up next term.
And going forward, what comes next? And ultimately, do you think she'll be confirmed?
Well, you know, the current reality of the Senate is that there are 50 Democrat votes, and with the tiebreaker of Vice President Harris, that's all the votes you need for confirmation, because that would get you to 51. Currently, all of the Democratic senators have voted for every single one of Joe Biden's nominees, and that includes some very extreme nominees indeed. So unfortunately, I think just with the reality of the Senate dynamics, you know, people say elections have consequences, and this is really evidence of that. Not just the election of Joe Biden to be the president, but the election of senators that are going to simply rubber stamp his nominees, regardless of how extreme their own positions are. Or how much they refuse to even talk about their own positions in this case. So I think that suggests that she will likely be confirmed. I don't know when the vote will be. It could be as early as next week, but more likely a couple weeks from now. The Senate Senator Schumer has said they want to get this done by the Easter recess. So obviously that only leaves us a few weeks for that, although she wouldn't take her seat on the court, if confirmed, until June at the end of the Supreme Court term.
Well, Carrie, thank you so much, and we appreciate you weighing in. Always appreciate it.
Thanks.
Idaho has enacted its Pro-Life Heartbeat Protection Act, which bans abortions after 6 weeks. Idaho's governor signed a law yesterday, which is very similar to the Texas heartbeat law. It takes effect in 30 days. Meanwhile, California's governor has signed a law prohibiting health insurers from collecting the out-of-pocket costs of abortion procedures. In reaction, the California Catholic Conference says the state is promoting abortion at the expense of mothers with children. Working pregnant women may soon have more on-the-job protections. That's thanks in part to efforts by Republican Senator Bill Cassidy. He tells EWTN News Nightly employers should treat pregnant women the same as other workers.
This says that if you can make the accommodation, make it. But you don't have to twist yourself into knots, go to extra expense in order to comply. Pro-family, pro-life, pro-mama, pro-baby. Business is for it, labor is for it.
And so is the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. They wrote to Congress that the bill will, quote, make the workplace a safer environment for nursing mothers, pregnant women, and their unborn children. The U.S. House has already passed the bipartisan bill. Senator Cassidy says he hopes the Senate will act on it soon. Coming up, a preview of the Holy Father's trip next month to a country that's 90% Catholic. For the first time since 2017, North Korea has launched a suspected intercontinental ballistic missile. Japan says it may have landed in its northern territorial waters after a 71-minute flight. The U.S. is condemning the launch as a brazen violation of UN Security Council resolutions. A car bomb in Yemen's southern city of Aden has killed a senior military official, his son, and 3 other guards. Yesterday's attack struck the commanding general's convoy. The explosion destroyed vehicles and left scattered debris. There has been no claim of responsibility, but the city is frequently targeted by Iranian-supported Houthi rebels. At the Vatican next week, Pope Francis will meet with Canadian Catholic bishops and a delegation of Indigenous people. The meeting will address reports of unmarked grave sites at former church-run residential schools. COVID-19 postponed the meeting last December. Well, after meeting with officials from Canada, the Holy Father will depart for his apostolic trip. Pope Francis is set to visit Malta on April 2nd and 3rd. The trip was postponed from the spring of 2020 because of the coronavirus pandemic. It will be the 3rd time a pope has visited the Mediterranean island south of Italy. EWTN News Rome correspondent Colm Flynn joins us now from Malta. Colm, good evening. Great to see you. Can you set the scene for us and the backdrop for this papal trip?
Good evening, Tracy, and yes, indeed I can. Hello from Valletta, the capital of Malta on the Mediterranean Sea. And this is a group of 3 islands close together that make up the nation of Malta. Very small population, around 500,000 people, and a very historic place. There have been people settled here from about 6,000 years before the birth of Christ. And you can see signs of that history around every corner. A very Catholic country too, around 90% of the population professing to be Catholic. And so, Tracy, this upcoming visit of Pope Francis is something that we have sensed from moving around the island. The local Maltese people are very excited about and really looking forward to. Now, the Pope was originally meant to come here back in 2020, but that was postponed, of course, due to COVID-19. And this will be Pope Francis's first papal trip of 2022. The last one he had cancelled at the last minute due to bad health. That was a scheduled trip to Florence in Italy. He will be here for 2 days, from Saturday, April the 2nd to Sunday, April the 3rd. And as is the norm on these trips, he will have a very packed schedule.
And Colm, can you tell us, give us an idea of what Pope Francis will be doing when he's there in Malta, and also, why he is visiting that small nation?
Well, according to the schedule that the Vatican released, he will be taking in 3 cities and visiting various sites that are important to Catholics here. For example, St. Paul's Grotto, where it is believed that St. Paul, one of the 12 apostles, in 60 AD stayed after he was shipwrecked while traveling with other sailors. Tradition says that he stayed there for around 3 months in a place that has now been turned into a grotto. He will also visit the Marian Shrine of Tapinu, which is a hugely significant spot for believers here, and where Mary is said to have spoken to a local woman in 1883. Now, Pope Francis will be the 3rd pontiff, Tracy, to visit Malta after St. John Paul II and Pope Benedict XVI. The first papal visit took place in 1990 when Pope John Paul II was given a rousing welcome. He visited again in 2001, and then in 2010, Pope Benedict XVI visited Malta, and this was at the height of the clerical sex abuse scandals, where he met with and asked for forgiveness from some of the survivors here.
And Colm, I understand that Pope Francis, that he's planning to meet with some in the migrant community while he's there. What more can you tell us about that?
That's right. Pope Francis, he is scheduled to meet with refugees while he's here at the St. John's Centre, and there he'll deliver a speech. He will talk to them and very much try and talk to the hearts of the Maltese people. It's one of the last appointments on his trip here. And there are approximately 9,000 to 10,000 refugees living here in the country. Most of them have been arriving and crossing the sea from North Africa. And actually, Tracy, the theme of this papal trip is they showed us unusual kindness. And really, one could say that Pope Francis, he will be here raising awareness of the plight of the migrants who have come here looking for refugee status. It's probably one of the main reasons for this Mediterranean visit to Malta. Tracy?
Oh, Colm, thank you so much. Colm Flynn, EWTN Newsroom correspondent. Thank you again.
Thank you, Tracy.
Up next, why one U.S. company is sending food and something spiritual to Ukrainian refugees. Goya Foods is doing its part to help fulfill Ukrainian refugees' hunger, both physically and spiritually. The company is delivering thousands of pounds of food to those affected by the war, and that is not all. The company's CEO and president, Bob Unanue, recently traveled to Poland to bring refugees something to nourish their souls: rosaries. 15,000 of them. And joining us now is Bob Unanue. Bob, welcome. Thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it. There is so much I want to talk to you about, but first, tell us why Goya Foods decided to be a part of the relief efforts for the Ukrainians and why it was so important to you.
Well, Tracy, thank you. And we've always been part of humanitarian aid, which nourishes the body. In this particular case, what turned into be a mission, a humanitarian mission, turned into be a spiritual mission. You nourish the body for a moment, you nourish the soul forever. I was on an interview and I mentioned the fact is that why can we justify abusing and exploiting children in the womb? Then we can also justify abusing and exploiting children outside the womb. This interview led this woman in San Antonio to offer us a rosary. She offered us one, it turned into 15,000. And then she said to us, please take these to the refugees, the Ukrainian refugees. And we did. We went off with a group with 15,000 rosaries and 7 big suitcases. And we got to Poland and headed to the border. And every step along the way, I believe our Mother Mary was with us, the hand of God, no doubt. Through the Knights of Columbus of Poland, we were able to get rosaries to Dominican priests in Lviv, with Green Berets who go in and actually deliver and extract children. This led us again to a border town called Rebene. And there in the Knights of Columbus Mercy Hut, where there are priests, nuns, there's a chapel, there's atheists, there's people of all faiths helping out. And we met this incredible woman, Nella. Nella and her 4-year-old son, Andrei, and they had to leave their father and husband, Andrei, back in Ukraine. And what happened was, I asked her, what did you say when you left? And she said, my husband said to me, love and protect our child, and I will defend and protect our country. And this whole story is about the millions of women and children. This Friday, when the Pope is going to consecrate the people of Ukraine and Poland to the Sacred Heart, Ukraine and Russia to the Sacred Immaculate Heart of Mary. It is also the feast of the Annunciation, where the angels announced to Mary that she would be bearing the Son of God. And it's all about, this trip was all about, to me, the women who've been entrusted with loving and protecting the child. Mother Teresa says, Saint Mother Teresa, we need to bring the children to the center of our care and concern. And to see these women over there who are carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders, protecting and shielding the children, because the children are walking around like it's an adventure. But that love of loving and protecting. So it's loving and protecting the child in the womb, loving and protecting the child outside the womb. You know, God created life. God created humanity. And humanity has created every possible way to destroy itself. Chemical, nuclear, biological, bullets. From Cain and Abel, we've invented ways to harm each other. And this is a call, and it's no coincidence with the Annunciation, with the sacred, the Immaculate Heart of Mary. We went to Our Lady of Czestochowa. I went to see the Shrine of the Divine Mercy, where Saint Faustina lived and died. Her order, the Orders of Our Lady of Mercy, takes care of prostitutes and trafficked children. And I asked Sister Teresa, who was at the order, and this is in Krakow, where St. John Paul II lived and worked. Their mission is to take care of these children. And I asked her, how old are the children that come? The women, 20s, 30s, but also down to 12 years old. We abandoned women and children in Afghanistan, 12 years old. There is now trafficking occurring at the border of Ukraine and Poland and other countries. They're extorting, they're exploiting and abusing the children out of the womb, as we have also exploited them in the womb. We can look to Putin, we can look to incredibly evil or dark-hearted people, but we do need to look within ourselves, because we have the ability, and man has always had the ability, man and woman, to destroy itself. We need to love and build, not hate and destroy. And so I'm praying that Pope Francis, this Friday, the 25th, was the end of the novena, to consecrate the people of Russia and Ukraine to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. It's all about our Mother Mary and the love of a mother and protection and shielding of our children.
Absolutely. And Bob, we're running out of time, probably 30 seconds or so left. But I first want to thank you for all the good works that you and Goya are doing. And obviously that trip touched you so much. I'm curious, though, I wanted to ask you this. When you were handing out the rosaries, what were people saying to you when you were giving them that spiritual nourishment?
You know, they received it. You know, Nella, when we had this conversation, she wrote us, we're still in contact, and she said, when I arrived to the Mercy tent, I was depressed, I was heavy-hearted, and you all, the women I was with, the group I was with, they all lifted her spirit, and one person at a time. That is how the power of prayer and love to that was felt by us being there with these rosaries, and it changed this one woman, and hopefully many, many more that are, you know, victims but the loving and caring power of prayer and motherhood is just, it's the only way we can turn and defeat hate and evil.
Absolutely. And Bob, thank you so much for all that you're doing for everyone over there and over here too in the United States too. We appreciate it, and God bless you, Bob.
God bless you, Tracy. Thank you.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.